Welcome to MojoPlays, and today we are ranking the Metroid series. For this list, we'll be going over every main game in the Metroid franchise and ranking them from worst to best. If there's a Metroid game you think should rank higher, or think we should have included the spin-off titles, please let us know in the comments.
Before we begin, we publish new content all week long, so be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos.
Number 12. Metroid Other M. Yeah, you all probably saw this coming. Metroid Other M is widely regarded as the most divisive Metroid game yet. While some people do enjoy the different things it brings to the table, such as its varied play perspectives and attempts at a more complex storyline, those same things turned off many longtime fans. A lot of Metroid fans didn't like Samus Aran's characterization, or the changes to the health system, or the fact that you needed permission to use your own abilities. All those changes added up to a game that, at best, is, well, still decent, but the Metroid games are known for being more than that.
And as a result, it touched me on some level that Adam would acknowledge that past by calling me something delicate, like lady.
Number 11. Metroid 2: Return of Samus. The only Metroid game on the Game Boy, Metroid 2: Return of Samus is admittedly underrated. It introduces several new concepts after the first game that would become series staples, including save points, Metroids having multiple stages, and various weapons and upgrades. Even so, the game is held back from ranking higher by its hardware limitations, and tracking down all the Metroids can get pretty tedious. But the potential and core of the game is solid enough that fans have done plenty of remakes over the years, and we'll be discussing its official remake soon enough. Number 10. Metroid Prime Hunters. The first handheld Metroid game to use a first-person perspective, Metroid Prime Hunters was innovative for the series in other ways too. Its emphasis on multiplayer and characters other than Samus Aran proved interesting. It's also the first game in the franchise to feature travel to multiple worlds, which would be seen later in the Prime series. However, the game's control scheme with the DS stylus can take some getting used to, and its single player doesn't offer the length and depth of most other Metroid games. Still, it's an interesting experiment for the franchise and well worth trying out. Number 9. Metroid. The game that started it all, Metroid still plays great today. All the series staples, from the bosses to the music to the power-ups to the huge, sprawling, interconnected map, they all began with Metroid. It essentially started the Metroidvania genre and also showcased one of the earliest female protagonists in gaming. Still, for as good as it is, the rest of the games in the Metroid franchise managed to improve on its formula in many ways. For instance, the fact that it still uses passwords is a mark against it. Even so, Metroid is a rock-solid foundation for the franchise. Number 8. Metroid Prime 3: Corruption. The final entry in the Metroid Prime trilogy, Metroid Prime 3 Corruption may land the lowest for us, but it's obviously by no means a bad Metroid game. It has multiple worlds to explore, rival bounty hunters to battle, and makes great use of the Wii's motion controls for some cool puzzles. It takes many of the design elements from the previous two games and refines them to near perfection. While the game does suffer from some longer load times and its control scheme isn't for everyone, Corruption remains a fantastic conclusion to the Prime series. For now, at least. Number 7. Metroid Zero Mission. We've already discussed the merits of the original Metroid, but Metroid Zero Mission is a remake done right. Not only does it update the graphics to 32-bit level, but it also smooths away the rough edges of its predecessor. The map system is improved and save points are included to make progression easier. There's also expanded content with a new area, enemies, and a new final boss, as well as a section where Samus wears the titular Zero suit. Metroid Zero Mission takes everything from its base game and improves upon it, which is exactly what you want in a remake. Number 6. Metroid Samus Returns. Speaking of remakes, Metroid Samus Returns is a remake of the Game Boy's Metroid 2. Fans have done remakes of the game for years, but Nintendo at last made it official. Along with updated graphics for the 3DS, Samus Returns implements new gameplay features from not only other Metroid titles, but also newly introduced features such as the Scan Pulse, which makes finding hidden blocks much easier. Samus also has access to a counter ability, which allows for new ways of taking on enemies and bosses. And speaking of bosses, these can get a little repetitive, given that you have to fight variations on the same Metroid over and over again. But on the whole, Samus Returns is a solid entry in the franchise. Number 5. Metroid Prime 2 Echoes. Sequels are always tricky to pull off, but Metroid Prime 2 was brave in trying different things. Echoes features a world split into light and dark versions of itself. Not only does this allow for some creepy and fascinating world building, but it also leads to some very difficult gameplay, since the dark world constantly damages you and the different beams have ammo limitations. Echoes is also one of the first Metroid games to feature multiplayer, which, granted, isn't that great, but we appreciate the effort. Metroid Prime 2 Echoes throws a lot of new things at the wall, and while not all of them stick, those looking for a creative and challenging Metroid game will surely enjoy it. Number 4. Metroid Fusion. A return to the Game Boy Advance, Metroid Fusion took the series in a new direction, with Samus facing off against the deadly X-Parasite. While Metroid Fusion may be more linear and less open than other titles in the series, it's also more focused, with a tight and suspenseful story. The action is fast-paced, and even if Metroid Fusion doesn't reinvent the franchise's combat, it still does add new touches like being able to hang from ledges. Fusion is aptly named, because it feels like a blend of many of the elements from Metroid games before it to create a new and satisfying experience. Number 3. Metroid Dread. There are plenty out there who are calling this game the best Metroid yet. Look, recency bias is a thing, and we don't want to jump the gun here, but still, it is so damn good. Made by the same team behind Samus Returns, Metroid Dread refines the elements introduced there, such as parrying, while also placing a bigger emphasis on stealth, including the ability to turn invisible. Being hunted by the Emmy offered some of the tensest gameplay in the franchise. Another major highlight are the boss fights, which are among the best in the series. Metroid Dread was a long time in the making, but it was worth the wait. Number 2. Metroid Prime. Transitioning a franchise from 2 to 3 dimensions can be difficult to do well, but Metroid Prime did it to perfection. Featuring an expansive world to explore, Metroid Prime puts players inside Samus' suit and lets us experience things from her perspective. All of the Metroid staples transition beautifully into 3D, and Prime offers a ton of story, lore, puzzles, and action that was never possible before it. Although later entries in the Prime series refined elements of its gameplay and improved on them, the original can't be matched for its degree of atmosphere and for how innovative it was for both the franchise and FPS games. Number 1. Super Metroid. You can argue that Super Metroid isn't the best Metroid game. That's totally fair. But we would argue that it's the one most other Metroid games aspire to be. It took everything from the first 2 games and did it bigger and better. Its map is huge, but easier to traverse. It introduced series staples like the Grapple Beam and Speed Booster, and it still controls flawlessly today. Additionally, its graphical style is imitated by several of the games that followed it. If we had to pick one game to use to illustrate what the Metroid series is like, Super Metroid is our top choice every time.
Check out these other great clips from MojoPlays, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos.